Greetings. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Sunday sermon. I'm Reverend Riff. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We've been off for a couple weeks. I hope everyone has used that time well and enjoyed their time. I hope you're having a great weekend. It is a kind of a spectacular day here in Pittsburgh, but we're going to make the best out of it. It's kind of rainy, but we're supposed to have a window of sunshine. And in that window of sunshine, I'm going to take the homies and go down and watch a baseball game. Or at least I'm going to sit there and drink beer and chirp people. It's all the same. That's what baseball's for, right? So I hope everybody is doing well. And we have a fun one today. Today, we're gonna get a little silly. Not that we're ever paragons of, stoicism here. But today especially, we're going to get a little bit silly. We're going to have some fun. And we're going to do two things today. Our mission is twofold. It's cooled off and it's glorious for you. Yeah, I think I've got those storms right now and they're trying to fuck with my baseball. Yeah, paragons of stoicism here. But, we're going to do two things today. I've been thinking about doing this for a while. And it just hasn't worked out. It hasn't fit. But today we're going to do it. It doesn't really fit today either, but I'm just going to jam it in there. Punch it in, make it fit. We're going to get the commandments from the big fucking space dragon. There are not 10 commandments, because 10 is too many for a free society. We don't need 10. But we have commandments. You got to have commandments, right? How could you be a real religion without fucking commandments? It doesn't even make sense. So, we've got commandments. We're going to jam it in. Not even greasing it up. We're just going to push it in there. And then we're going to meet the big fucking space dragon's family. And I'll talk more about that right before we get to it. But that's going to be fun. And we're going to kind of really get his origin story. His true origin story. Everybody loves an origin story, right? Everybody loves an origin story. We're going to get the big fucking space dragon's origin story today. So buckle up. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a friend. And let's jump in. So, commandments. Everybody knows the story of the 10 commandments, right? The Israelites just got out of Egypt. They're on the move. They get to Mount Sinai. And God tells Moses, come up here. We need to have a chat. So Moses heads up to the top of the mountain, and the big fucking space dragon appears and tells him, got some rules. And he scratches 10 commandments into stone tablets that Moses proceeds to then take and smash when he sees that the people are breaking the rules that they didn't know they had yet. Because, hey, nothing in this book is logical. So apparently another set is made, and they're put inside the Ark of the Covenant along with Aaron's rod. We all remember that story. Well, I decided that 10 commandments, those commandments are outdated, and they're really restrictive and very judgy, and we don't need that. So I've decided, Moses was kind of a baby, threw a temper tantrum. I mean, people are breaking rules you didn't tell them they had yet. And your response is to smash the tablets that were just given to you. I kind of imagine that was an interesting conversation. Hey, Yahweh, I might need some more of those tablets. I wrote them in stone. What happened? I kind of got mad because people were breaking the commandments that they didn't know they had yet. And so I smashed them. That's how I envision that story playing out. Not well. Yeah. They're kind of judgy. I don't like them. So we decided, I talked to the big fucking space dragon. We came up with the perfect amount of commandments. He did get lucky. It's probably because Moses had horns and the dragon was into that. He's like, hey, you have horns like me. I'm into this. Oh, Kurt Cummings. Thank you so much. You silly man. Welcome. So, it's time to get to the commandments of the big fucking space dragon. These commandments, I really feel, will help you live your life to the fullest while not infringing on anybody else's good time. Okay? So let's start at the very beginning. First commandment. Obviously, it's the most important because it's number one. Duh. Don't be a jagoff. It's really not that hard, but being a jag to your buddies is totally fine. This should not require much explanation. Don't be a jagoff. If you're going to do something, and it at all crosses your mind that it might be a jagoff thing to do, don't do it. Really ponder. Is this the kind of thing that a jagoff would do? And if it is, don't do it. Don't be a jagoff. It's just real easy, right? But it's okay to be a jag to your buddies. Tormenting your buddies, that is completely fine. As long as it's done with a good heart. Tormenting your buddies, completely fine. Being a jagoff, not fine. So rule number one, don't be a jagoff. Very easy commandment to follow, yet the one that gets broken the most, I feel. Number two, we call this the Roadhouse commandment, given to us by the great prophet Dalton, also known as Patrick Swayze. Be patient until it is time to not be patient, but still don't be a jagoff. Yeah, be patient until it is time to not be patient, because patience is a virtue, but so is being a man of action. So be patient until it is time to not be patient. But when you have to not be patient, still don't be a jagoff about it. Again, always refer back to the first commandment. If at any point you have trouble with the other commandments, refer back to the first one. As we said, there's a reason it's the first one. It's the most important. Okay? So, be patient until it's time to not be patient. But again, referring back to commandment number one, don't be a jagoff. Number three, own the scope of your ignorance and work diligently to destroy it. And don't be a jagoff. This one, again, none of us know everything. All of us have blind spots. All of us have blind spots. All of us have biases. We have suppositions. We have projections on others of things that we don't like about ourselves. The scope of our own ignorance is mammoth. Forever. The smartest person in the world is still massively ignorant on a whole lot of things. And you can either be a jagoff and act like you aren't completely misinformed, uninformed, or poorly informed on a whole lot of issues, or you could not be a jagoff.
Praise hail and praise Dale.
Or you could not be a jagoff and just roll with it. Accept that you don't know things and be willing to learn. In fact, you shouldn't just be willing to learn, you should be actively seeking to learn. And it doesn't even have to be academic. Learn socially, learn emotionally, learn physically. Just always be learning. If you're not learning, you're being a jagoff. And what does that go back to number one? Don't be a jagoff. Can't stress that enough. Number four. Everyone is entitled to be their unapologetic self, provided they do not harm anyone or infringe upon their own entitlement to self. Again, no one should have to fucking censor themselves within reason around anyone else. If what you're doing doesn't hurt anybody and doesn't prevent them from being able to be themselves, there's nothing wrong with doing it and being yourself. Now, if your behavior is going to infringe upon someone else's entitlement to self, well then refer to rule number one and don't be a jagoff. It's so many times with freedom, and you know who I'm talking about, the freedom crowd. They're so caught up in what they're allowed to do and what they can do, they don't stop to think about if they should or if it's necessary. That's not how things work in our kingdom, okay? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And if not doing something won't really bother you, but it'll make somebody else feel way more comfortable and way happier, Don't be a jagoff. Just fucking do it. Or don't do it in the situation. But if you feel that you need to be yourself, then everybody else needs to suck it up and accept that you are you. You are made because the big fucking space dragon wanted you to be that way. And we all got shit we can work on. Also, refer back to number 3. Because if somebody is if something that someone is doing is bothering you, own the scope of your ignorance and accept the fact that maybe why it bothers you is because you don't understand it. Then work diligently to destroy that ignorance. Maybe come to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And there's a very good chance that it'll become easier to accept for you. But even if it's be something that you can't accept, if it doesn't break rule number 4, then don't be a jagoff. Just get over it. Get over yourself. Number 5. Your wealth does not define you. Your record collection does. It's that simple. I don't care if you're rich, if you're poor. That means nothing. But if you listen to shitty music, that means something. It's music is a manifestation of your spirit into a tangible form that can be shared with others. And if you're sharing bullshit, fuck you. Video games, yeah, I chose record collection, but it's the art that speaks to you. That's what really defines you. What speaks to you? And if what speaks to you is creepy or stupid, you might be creepy or stupid. And that's okay to like stupid shit. Just don't be a jagoff about it. Own your ignorance, too. All of those will help you have a better record collection, video game collection, and again, they'll help you not be a jagoff. Because what is the key theme of our structure here? Don't be a jagoff.
Can I get the iPad?
Oh, sure, bud. There you go. And our final commandment, 6, is the perfect number of commandments and chili dogs. Remember this to keep it holy. Beer comes in 6-packs. Commandments come in 6-packs. Chili dogs should come in 6-packs. I'm working on it. Yes, he is polite. He understands and does not wish to interrupt our service this morning, but a man's got to play Goat Simulator when a man's got to play Goat Simulator. Notice that he was not a jagoff while being his unapologetic self. Yeah, hey, it's like I said, it's okay to like stupid stuff, because Limp Bizkit is very stupid. But it's okay. I'm not going to be a jagoff. And, harp on that. Just like you would not be a jagoff and force me to listen to Limp Bizkit. Although that would probably fall under being a jag to your buddies is totally fine. So you'd still be okay if you did. You would just also, it would be okay if I retaliated. See, that's how this is supposed to work. So there you have it. 6 commandments that will help you lead a happier life, as brought to you by Riff and the Big Fucking Space Dragon. So I hope you find those useful tools to help you live your best life and help others live their best life. That's what we're here for. This is a self-help show now. So, let's really move along here. Let's dive in and let's have some fun, okay? Now, I would say that most people know that the Jewish people have been around for quite some period of time. But we also know that there was a time when there were not the Jewish people. That, everybody starts somewhere, right? Everybody starts somewhere. And I think it goes without saying, for the most part, I would... You've got all the tools you need. I think that we all know that no culture is a monolith, right? Everybody borrows things from other people, their influence from other people, their environment, their situation, everything helps shape their belief system. The stories that they tell are often, and by the time they got written down so that we have access to them today, they were retold thousands of times by all, generations and generations of people. I think we all accept that. If you don't know that, Congratulations, you learned something today, because that happened. Everybody's shit comes from roughly the same bowl of soup, okay? We've been spreading it out, but it all goes back to, a few primordial bowls of soup, so to speak. And what's funny is when people don't see that. And when they try to believe that that's not the case. What I'm, of course, referring to is the origin of Yahweh, of Christianity, of the big fucking space dragon, of all of it. Where do those stories come from? I know this is going to be shocking for anyone that would actually be watching this that is, a good church-going Christian. But your religion did not just fall out of the sky and announce itself to the world, many years ago. It didn't. It was a remix of a remix of a remix of a remix. It's somebody who found a religion that worked for the people in their area and said, what would I think make this better if we changed some things so that it was more specific to us? That's what happens. That doesn't make it. I'm not gonna hit you with anything here that's gonna change the world. I didn't dig up new research. But instead, what I did is dig up a lot of research that I feel like people are either willfully ignorant of or they don't want to think about, because it makes Christianity and the idea of Yahweh and El and all of that, it doesn't make it less special, but it shows that it wasn't original. Because it wasn't. And that's okay. But we need to accept that. And so to pretend that these stories are completely unique and that they definitely happened because, they're written down in the Bible, so this must be history. No. They're folk tales that have been retold time and again. And in this case, we actually know where they came from. They came from a little place called Ugarit. So come with me, if you will. We're going to get in our time machine here. It's not a historical document, I know. It's stunning. All right, we're going to get in our time machine. We're going to go back over 8,000 years. Or, if you're a young Earth creationist, negative 2022. That's where we're going. 2,000 years before the Earth existed, that's when we're going back to, because it existed. And there were people there. So, we're in northern Syria. There's a town called Ugarit. It puts up walls in 6000 BC. People were living there before that. It is one of the oldest cities to exist. Weren't a whole lot of cities that were more OG than Ugarit. These people lived there, and around 6000 BC, they decided to put walls around their city and really start to make it what you and I think of as a city today. This is way back. Again, 2,000 years before the Earth existed, according to young Earth creationists. I don't know how you reconcile that. That's not my problem. I'm not an idiot. So, these people, they started forming a religion. And I want to put something in context for you. The first time that we ever see any written record of people referring to themselves as the Hebrews or as Israeli people is in 1209 BCE. Ugarit started in 6000 BCE. The time between when Ugarit was founded and when the Jews, someone first wrote down that there were these people referring to themselves as the Jews, that's longer than from that time that someone first wrote down that Jews existed till now. All that time, it was longer from the time Ugarit was founded until I really want to drive that home, because that gives you a scope of how big of a time span we're talking about here. There was a whole lot of time for these myths to go through a whole lot of revisions and changes and modifications and people making it their own and putting their own twist on it, because we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So, so Ugarit was first. It's a hot minute, yes. So Ugarit, it hit its golden age around 1800 BCE. It was trading with the Egyptians, with the Hittite kingdom. The people there would have most likely been what we would consider Amoritic descent. You remember them? They show up in the Bible too as the Canaanites. And so it's, there's a whole lot going on there. But these people, they're around 1800, they really hit their peak. They start trading and whatever. Around 1500, they start writing down a lot of their myths for the first time. And then, as we know, as I stated earlier, they cease to exist right around the time that the Hebrews come into be. Ugarit, it gets destroyed, we believe, by the Sea People. Anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, look up late Bronze Age collapse. Nobody really knows who they were. Could have been the Phoenicians, could have been any number of people, could have been people from Crete. But whoever they were, they showed up, wrecked shop, and the city was abandoned around 1180 BCE. So just before that is the first time we ever noticed that the Hebrews exist. Now remember when we did Cain and Abel and we talked about the anti-urban bias? This is going to make a lot more sense to you now. The people that became the Hebrew people, they were basically nomadic herdsmen who lived outside of Ugarit, and they supplemented their income by trading with the city. But they never lived in the city, and they stayed out on the outskirts and kind of spread all through the area that we think of today as Israel. And that kind of, I think that should give you, they're the people that eventually came to call themselves the Hebrews, the Israelites. I think that would hopefully give you a little backstory into why there's that anti-urban bias. Is they had always lived outside of that city and had always had at least some animosity between city living and nomadic herdsman lifestyle. It also helps explain how some of them ended up enslaved by the Egyptians. It wasn't because all the Hebrews were down there. It's because a certain portion of them strayed far enough south that they came into contact with the Egyptians and they got roped up. It happens. It's, again, there was not this whole massive, they came in and pulled out all the Israelites. That didn't happen. There's no evidence of that. But yeah, there were some of them that probably ended up in indentured servitude. Egyptian slavery is far different than we think of slavery today, so I even bristle to use the term slavery because it's a lot closer to what we would remember as indentured servitude versus chattel slavery, because yes, even people 5,000 years ago were more civilized than the 18th century South. Just saying. So now you've got these people and they've showed up on the scene, and Ugarit is about to fall. And what we've come to find is that they all pretty much shared the same pantheon of gods, but different people in different areas worshipped them slightly differently, might cobble some different stories together, and would end up with pretty similar versions of each other's gods, but calling them by different names. And what I'm going to show you today is a lot more of those stories than you think you do. And a whole lot more of the Bible is cribbed from those stories than you think it is. So, without further ado, let's switch over here and let's learn about "and you thought your family was messed up," because the BFSD has a really warped family tree. Okay? Alright, well, first we got to start with anything. We have to talk about the Baal cycle. This is something that was discovered around 1928 when Ugarit's remains were found. And archaeologists, you could cut diamond with the boners they had over this. Not only did they find one of the earliest human civilizations, but they found actual written record of their religious practices, their thought process, their hierarchy of their gods. This is, dream stuff for these guys. So it was discovered on these clay tablets, like I said, around 1928 through about 1935 is when they really were pulling these tablets out with a lot more of the story than they ever expected to be able to find for something that at the time was already, over 3,000 years old. The tablets that we have date to around 1500 BCE, but they found some other things that, they were telling these stories dating back probably about as far as Ugarit had been there. So these stories, again, are older than the young Earth creationist Earth. I don't know how that works, ask them. They were written at a pivotal time in Ugaritic history. Its golden age was coming to an end, and it was not far from the events that would lead to the rise of the Sea Peoples that were going to not only destroy this civilization, but countless others. Like, the whole world kind of hit the reset button around 1200 BCE, and Ugarit was no exception. They got caught up in it. They have a lot of familiar elements. Anybody who reads them, you start to notice a whole lot of parallels to biblical characters. Some of them are more obvious than others. That's what you have me for, to help point out all of them. So let's meet the players. Well, first, actually, we have to talk about one other thing. Who is your God, and what do they do? Now, most people consider the Israelites to be one of the first monotheistic societies. They did not worship a whole pantheon of gods. There's one God, the one true God. They worship him. That's their phrase, the one true God. That is monotheism, right? Well, there's more options than that. And the actual ancient Israelites were a little more complicated. So we all know what polytheism, right? Belief in worship of multiple deities. The Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Babylonians, all of those guys, most people in history have been polytheistic. They have believed that there are more than one God. And for our buddy Baal, this helps remove the need for theodicy. You don't have to explain evil because you just have bad guys. You have good gods and bad gods, just like you have good people and bad people. And the gods in polytheistic religions often are more like people. They are never perfect. Instead, they are impulsive, rash, proud. They have all the same foils as humans do. And that's how they help us learn about ourselves, is they show that even with infinite power, people do stupid shit. Yeah, but you see, if you don't have a divine creator, the Satan thing isn't a cop-out. It's only a cop-out if you have a divine creator who says, I created everything and I could make everything perfect and I chose not to. That seems strange. But the idea, if some of them are good and some of them are bad, and the good gods didn't create the bad gods, or they didn't intend for the bad gods to be bad again, the flawability makes polytheism work. The flawed nature of humanity. But yeah, a divine creator creating a Satan, that seems insane. We'll get to that. Of course, there's monotheism. You all know that. The belief and worship of the word true God. You believe that all other deities are false. They're not real gods. Just your God. That's the only God. This is not the ancient Israelite belief. This did not become the belief of the Israelites until many, many years later. What the ancient Israelites actually were was a monolatry. What's that? That is the belief in many gods, but practicing the worship of only one. This is what they actually were. The ancient Israelites believed that these other gods that you hear mentioned in the Bible were legit. They believed that they were real. They just didn't worship them. They only worshipped Yahweh. But they believed that these other gods were legit. If you read a lot of the stories in the Old Testament, you see genuine fear from even people. Like the story of Balaam always comes to mind, and that God had to worry that Balaam had power to do things and that Balaam could curse his people. Oh, Moloch. I can explain. Yeah. Moloch was a god. They're not even sure if Moloch was an actual god or if Moloch was the kind of sacrifice that meant child sacrifice. But yes, Moloch, the way he's been depicted, is a giant brass god that kind of like the bronze bull, but he would have hands, and they would put a baby in the hands, and the thing would be lit up, and the baby would burn alive, and they would blow trumpets so that people couldn't hear the baby screaming because, yeah. And they sacrificed children to him in Gehenna. We learned about that. So but was Moloch the abortion god? That's funny. Oh man, that's a stretch. But what are you gonna do? That's a stretch. So we have to keep in mind now that these ancient Israelites, they're monolatrists, not monotheists. They believe that these other gods are real, Moloch included. And so let's meet those other gods that they thought were real, and let's see how they all helped to turn in to the one true God that we all know now. First, we've got El, aka El Elyon, El Shaddai, or El Olam. All of those names, they're the same cat. This cosmic dude. He is a supreme ruler and chief in charge of the creation of the world, and he eventually cedes his power to one of his children. Most of the creation cycle stories from the Ugaritic texts, they're real similar to the creation story in Genesis. The second one, El fashions and builds the earth out of raw material. But there's also other ones where El just speaks it into existence. And so it's kind of funny that both of those stories exist of El, and sure enough, they both wind up in the Bible. Because competing sects would have believed different texts, they decided to put both of them in, make everybody happy. Who cares? He has 70 children with his wife Asherah. And yes, Asherah makes appearances in the Bible too. He is depicted as sometimes looking like a human, sometimes like a minotaur-like bull who sits on a throne, and the throne has lion's feet on it. It's kind of dope if you ask me. So that's El. He's, king shit. He would be somewhere between, like sort of like Zeus, but with less philandering, if that makes sense. Now we've got Asherah. She is the Queen of Heaven, is her title. Wife of the big guy. All other gods are said to have come from her. El has a really interesting creation story where basically chaos and light separate each other, and El is born from that. Asherah is born from his desire to fill the earth, or to fill the universe and to fill all that empty void. And then she is the mother of all the gods. She is also worshipped in fertility rituals, much like El. Be fruitful and multiply? Yeah, that's not an original thing. Yeah, unfun Zeus. That is not an original concept, okay? Be fruitful and multiply, that goes way back before the Bible. The people worshipped her as being the consort of Yahweh, her son. Marinate on that. Ew. And it even had altars to her in the temple. Yeah. There are multiple references all throughout the Bible to Asherah poles. Basically, totems that were put up to worship her, that she was Yahweh's wife as far as the Hebrews were concerned. Because as we're going to learn today, Yahweh is basically a mashup of like 5 other Canaanite gods. The Israelites took the gods that all their buddies and neighbors were worshiping and were like, hey, these are pretty dope. What if we though made our own like super god out of all theirs? Wouldn't that be cool? And then they did. and I guess it was cool. I don't know. Let's meet Anat. She is a study in duality. Everything about her is a contradiction. It's very interesting. She is a violent war goddess, but when you're trying to broker peace, that is also who you prayed to. She's also a fertility goddess who has many children, but is also a perpetual virgin. Where did that idea crop up later in history, I wonder? Drawing a blank, but I'm sure it's important. Her duty was to ensure El's desired successor. But she was ambitious. In the original text, El names a very specific successor, that this is who he wants to take over when he's gone. And Anat goes, but that's not the guy I'm married to. I would prefer if the guy that I'm married to was in charge. And she proceeds to engineer his ascension to the throne. And there are a whole host of Bible stories where a wife or mother engineers the ascension to the throne of her chosen partner or heir. Again, just recycling stories. Despite being depicted as beneath El in the established hierarchy, she repeatedly defies him or flat out threatens him with violence if she doesn't get her way. There are multiple stories where El tells her this is how it is, and she goes, bitch, I will cut you. And he's like, all right, calm down. Let's talk about this. It's rather fascinating that, she gets away with what she gets away with in the stories. She is depicted as being Yahweh's wife in most of the Ugaritic texts, and yet the Israelites decided to kind of relegate her to second tier status and kind of act like she wasn't his wife because everybody knew Asherah was the queen of heaven, and they kind of they turned Yahweh into El. Yahweh and El were distinctly different in the Ugaritic texts. The Israelites just kind of did a mashup. Also, for all you Shamgar stands, when they refer to him as Shamgar, son of Anath, this is who Shamgar would have worshipped. This would have been Shamgar's, this is his boo. He was the son of Anat, the violent, crazy warrior of the violent, crazy warrior priestess. Alright, let's look at this guy. What's he doing? Baal Hadad, sometimes called Baal, sometimes called Hadad. He is Anat's brother and husband. Ew. She is able to maintain her virginity because they do not copulate physically. They come together and basically think of fish spawning, only with magical energy, and that's how they are able to create children while she still maintains her perpetual virginity. He is a storm god. He lives in the clouds. He rides around on a pillar of fire and cloud. If only I had read that somewhere before. And he wields lightning. He's all about the lightning bolts. He hates snakes. Man, if only there was a story that would emphasize that. Can't think of it. But yeah, he really hates snakes. There are a whole bunch of stories about him fighting with snakes. He prefers to be called Lord. The word that he uses to go by means Lord. He will eventually supplant El as the king of the gods. And he is often depicted as a minotaur-like bull man. Again, that all checks out, right? Now let's talk about the Baal cycle. Round 1, Baal fights Yam. Yam is a giant sea monster, the god of the oceans and chaos. Think about the time that these stories would have been written. You're talking about triremes are about the extent of what kind of ships they have. So the ocean, open ocean, would have been terrifying. It would have absolutely represented chaos and destruction. It was unpredictable. They didn't know people. We were not in the golden age of exploration. So Yam was a giant sea monster that Baal has to battle. El initially sanctions Yam to become the ruler of the earth. And he says, I'm going to cede my power to you. I'm going to go into God retirement, whatever that is, and you're going to take over this planet. Yam starts building an elaborate palace from which he will rule. And again, we don't really understand the context, but it could be an early form of rich shaming. The other gods are like, really? This big ostentatious palace, this is where you're going to rule from? Okay, dick. Baal eventually challenges him and beats him to death with magic clubs, and then grinds him up and scatters his ashes as the only way to ensure that Yam won't reincarnate and come back for round 2. It is a bit extreme, but also awesome. Baal is now in charge. He has thwarted Yam. And what's really interesting is, do you know who Yam's pet was? A little guy named Leviathan, who is a sea monster that pops up in the book of Job, which happens to be one of the oldest written texts. So there's definitely some correlation to this story. In round 2, Baal must take on Mot. Mot is like Hades. Mot is the god of the underworld. It's actually pronounced Moat. I say Mot because it looks like Mot, but it's Moat. El initially sides with Moat, which scares Baal, so Baal fakes his death. I don't know how you do that as a god, but he pulls it off. Somehow this works. This really cheeses off Anat. So Anat goes and kills Moat because that's how she throws down. But then she remembers that you can't kill the god of the underworld, so he just resurrects himself. And then he and Baal have a battle, but this time Moat gives up when he realizes that Anat has swung the support of the gods behind Baal. And so Baal takes over. It's generally believed that this was how they explain the seasons. That the winter coming was the underworld taking, control, death, think, Persephone and the pomegranate seeds. It's the same story. And that this constant circular battle between the underworld and Baal is why you have seasons. Because Baal, of course, is a rain god, storm god. He would bring the rain that would help the fruit grow and the food and all that. And then he goes away when Moat takes over and it gets cold and everything dies. But then Baal defeats him and comes back again and the rains come back. And there you have a seasonal cycle explained in something that people could understand. Now, you might be saying, Riff, a lot of those Baal stories, they sound familiar to stuff I've read in my Bible. To which I would say, you're correct. Let's look at some specific instances. Doing our favorite thing to do here, using their words against them. So, this Baal, or Yahweh, or El, appears to be a storm god. In Exodus 9:23, Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven. Ew. And the Lord sent thunder and hail, and then the fire ran along upon the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. That sounds like a storm god to me. Judges 5, verse 4 through 5. Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchedest out of the field of Edom, and the earth trembled, and the heavens dropped, the clouds also dropped water. The mountains melted from before the Lord, even at Sinai from before the Lord, the God of Israel. Again, that really sounds like a storm god, if you ask me. So, okay, we're going to put a check mark there. They definitely made Yahweh a storm god. He defeats a giant sea monster. Clearly that's not in the Bible. Or is it? Psalms 89, 9 through 10. Right there in verse 9. Thou rulest the raging of the sea. When the waves thereof arise, thou stillest them. Thou hast broken Rahab in pieces, as one that is slain. Thou hast scattered thine enemies with thy strong arm. Rahab is another regional name for the sea monster Leviathan. So here we have Yahweh smashing Leviathan. And this is what you will constantly notice in the Bible. If you remember, who is Yahweh's number one enemy in the Old Testament? It's Baal. Because they're the same person. So the Israelites were attempting to, in their mythology, demonize the mythology of the people whose land they were going to violently snatch. Because if you remember anything about what the Old Testament actually is, it's the most violent land snatch in history. It is a, claim by the Israelites that God justified them exterminating the Canaanite people to take over that land. Well, when you're exterminating people, you also need to get rid of their religion. So, since the rest of the Canaanites worshipped Baal, the Hebrews took Yahweh, co-opted Baal, but then in their stories constantly have Yahweh kicking Baal's ass. And that's why you have the Elijah and the prophets of Baal. Every time the people are led astray, they go back to Baal. What's that meaning? That they're not exterminating the Canaanites fast enough because they're still worshiping their gods. And the Israelites can't have that, because what the Israelites are trying to do is much like what the Romans would try to do to them later, which is co-opt their religion in an attempt to erase them. Funny how turnabout is fair play. He's depicted as a bull in Exodus 32, 4 and 5. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool. And after he had made it a molten calf, and they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast for the Lord. All's fair in love and land grabs. You know it. So, right here, Aaron makes the people an altar. The golden calf story, every modern Christians depict that as that's what God was mad about, was that they were worshiping the calf. They only get that half right. He was mad that they were worshiping the calf like it was real. But he wasn't necessarily mad about the calf itself. Why? Because that was to be him. That was their depiction. Again, same. They made a golden calf because they envisioned Baal, El, Yahweh. They kind of had him as like a bull god. His consort is the Queen of Heaven. Surely there's no mention of this Queen of Heaven in the Bible who's married to Yahweh. Oh, wait. Jeremiah 44:17. We will certainly do everything we said we would. We will burn incense to the Queen of Heaven. And will pour out drink offerings to her, just as we and our ancestors, our kings and our officials did in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. At that time we had plenty of food and were well off and suffered no harm. Now, call me crazy, but I would be pretty sure that monotheism would make it impossible for there to be a Queen of Heaven unless she was the only one. And since we know that Yahweh exists, the only logical explanation is that the early Israelites were not monotheistic. They clearly believed that Yahweh had a wife, and right here, it even seems like they're doing a little bit of worshiping, which, and it doesn't mention that at any point they're going to get shit on for doing this. It's almost like it's not that big of a fucking deal. So now let's meet the God. And what do I mean by that? Okay, let me pause for just a second. So, we now have pretty strong evidence, both circumstantial and textual, that the Israelite Yahweh, the big fucking space dragon, is really their version of kind of the El-Baal dynamic put into a god. Well, that was their belief system up until the time that the Persians captured them. They were actually captured by the Babylonians, taken into exile. Then the Persians overthrow the Babylonians. King Cyrus is on the throne now. And he decides, I'm going to let these people go home. As long as they stay out of trouble, pay us our tribute, I don't care what gods they worship. Just make sure that they have, a way in place to rule. And other than that, let them do their thing. I'm not keeping them here. That makes him very popular with the Jews. Popular guy. Well, right at that time, right at that time, the Jews are writing down. They've been in exile. They've begun writing down what will become a lot of the books of the Old Testament, coupled with the fact that they now need to lay out an agreed upon history for themselves. We've talked about this, so that they can pick a ruler when they get back, and that they can have laws and structure their government around this agreed upon history. And so, right at that time, a brand new religious craze is taking over the scene, and that craze is called Zoroastrianism. It is unique in that it is one of the first religions that we ever know of to believe in an actual devil. To say that their God is a flawless, perfect God, and that all ill, all goodness flows forth from that God, and that all bad things flow forth from this adversary. That is what Zoroastrianism's main thing is, the duality of life. That there is a good side and a bad side, and that everything flows from one of those two entities. This is completely unique in the religious world at the time. And it catches on like wildfire, and it dramatically influences the Israelites, who are writing down their texts for the first time and getting ready to take these texts back to their ancestral homeland and try to reset up a kingdom and a government and a system and a way of life. They become heavily influenced by this idea that there should be one supreme God, and he would be the only God, and that anything good comes from him, and anything bad comes from someone else. And to take all that own it, like the big fucking space dragon in a lot of those early stories, he's lighting people on fire for looking at him the wrong way. All of a sudden, the Israelites still need to tell those stories, because these are the stories they grew up on. These are the stories they know. But you notice a definite shift in their belief system, especially in the books that would come written after the Old Testament. When they got back, they became a truly monotheistic religion, that they at that point believed that Yahweh was the only God. When they got back, Yahweh was the only God. And the way they rectified that, while not pissing off Cyrus, I'm saying, hey, we love you, dude, but your God isn't real, is they just co-opted a bunch of the stuff from his God into their God. And we're like, nah, see, same guy, we just used a different name. Just like they had done with the Canaanites. And so let's take a look at the god of Zoroastrianism, Ahura Mazda. Which, how they haven't already made a car called an Ahura Mazda, I don't know. He has no birth or origin story. He has always been and always will be. That is the first thing that the Hebrews lifted, and that modern Christians still really lean into. Every other god before this had some kind of god origin story. There always was some kind of origin story. This was the first time that somebody was like, nope, he's always been there. He exists beyond time. His goal is to lead mankind down the path of righteousness. This is also one of the first times that we ever see a God who is not as much worried on being worshipped. He's not as much worried about being worshipped and being angry when he's not, as he wants people to be good. And he wants to lead them down the path of positivity. He's like Big E. Think of him that way. He battles Ahriman the Accuser. What does Satan mean in Hebrew? That's right, it means accuser. And this is where, again, Ahriman is depicted as evil, but yet it's also kind of he's let off the hook by the fact that it's his job to be evil because he's there to tempt man. Because Ahura Mazda, also like the Hebrew God that we would come to know and love, believes in free will. He shows mankind the path of righteousness. Ar-Haman shows them the path of wickedness, and you have to pick. But yeah, most of your ideas of Satan come from Ar-Haman. He has 3 traits that are the first time that we really notice these traits being ascribed to a god was Ahura Mazda, and any Christian will know these 3. He's omniscient, he's omnipotent, and he's omnipresent. Those are 3 things that, again, when you look at the God in the Old Testament, pre-exile stuff, remember in Genesis, God has to go look for Moses. God isn't everywhere. He has to go, or God has to go, I'm sorry, Adam. God has to go look for him. Remember, Adam, where are you? God's walking around looking for him. It's repeatedly in the Old Testament, especially in Genesis, God comes across as somebody who can only be in one place at one time. He has to go somewhere. And the Spirit of the Lord came to them. And the Lord went over here. He went there. It's very clear that he was not omnipresent. And he wasn't all-powerful because they talk about times where he's concerned about things. And he wasn't omniscient because he has to ask questions. These are things that got added in later after the contact with Zoroastrianism, left its indelible thumbprint on the Hebrew people. It's also important to keep in mind that even the Hebrews themselves, there's times in the Bible where they refer to El as the God of the ancestors. That is who came down and walked around. He talked with Abraham. They cut birds in half and ran between them because that's not weird. And all of that was with El. But then all of a sudden, Yahweh is his son, and there's the text in Exodus about God, El divides up the world amongst his children, and the people of Israel are given to Yahweh. Later on, the Deuteronomist, the person who wrote Deuteronomy, decided that didn't really jive with what they were doing, because now they were a monotheism, so they basically just went back and be like, oh no, El, he was always Yahweh. It's the same guy. It means the same thing. It doesn't. In Isaiah 45:1, this is what the Lord God says to Cyrus, his anointed, whose right hand I have grasped to subdue nations before him, to disarm kings, to open the doors before him so that the gates will not be shut. What you're seeing there is the Israelites taking credit for Cyrus's success. In Isaiah they're claiming that Yahweh is actually who empowered Cyrus because Cyrus is his anointed. That, it's amazing how you release them from captivity and you get a really favorable write-up in their book. So, because Cyrus let them go home, they've decided that in fact, that's the whole reason he won and was in charge, is because Yahweh was using Cyrus to let them go home. Now, why Yahweh couldn't have just let them go home himself, or why couldn't Yahweh protect them? Well, that, you see, is the convenience of the flawed God narrative. That Yahweh could have protected them, but the people they used not worshiping him as an excuse for every military loss they ever suffered. They couldn't say, well, we prayed to Yahweh and we've been being good, so why did we get our ass handed to us by the Babylonians and dragged off into exile? Oh, it's because actually Yahweh was mad at us because we weren't being good. That's the only logical reason. Not that, our magical ark and dragon didn't protect us from their chariots. No, it's that he was mad at us. And that's why we lost. But if he hadn't been mad at us, we totally would have won. Much like, the idea of the devil is the cop-out that gets you out of having to explain why a just and benevolent God would allow bad things to happen. The idea that God can turn his love away from you if you don't worship him allows them to justify how when he doesn't bless them or give them what they need. So I hope this has, opened your eyes a little bit to the idea that, the Hebrew God has been an ever evolving thing, and that he's an amazing mashup of all these other guys. But his true Voltron final form is the big fucking space dragon. And that's who we celebrate here and follow his 6 perfectly numbered commandments. So I hope everybody has a great day. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of this, at least here, kind of drizzly Sunday. I know I'm planning on enjoying it no matter what. Take care, everybody. I'm not sure about next week. It's Mother's Day. That's going to depend on what Mrs. Riff wants to do. If not, we will be back for our season finale the week after. Our love letter to Lord Bale. We will be addressing theodicy, and I am going to do my darndest to take a stab at the problem of evil. I'm not going to solve it. I'm just going to really go hard at anybody who tries to explain it away. I will be rebutting the most common explanations for the existence of evil, and basically proving why that's stupid. So I hope you will join me for that. Thank you so much for being here this week. We're also going to do some cricket streams this week because that game is super fun. So I hope everybody has a really great rest of your Sunday. Thanks so much for being here. Take care, and remember, don't be a jagoff. It's really not that hard.